Welcome, where business buying banter meets no BS reality. Get ready to dive into the world of buying and selling businesses without the fluff and fancy jargon. Whether you're a seasoned business buying pro or a curious aspiring entrepreneur, this is where the real talk happens. Because in business, there's no room for sugarcoating. Let's get down to the brass tacks.
Well, welcome.
How are you, Deb?
In the house.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. It is Thursday.
Almost there, baby.
And it's my favorite time of the week where I get to spend a good 45 minutes with my co-host, Richard Parker. Business buying banter, baby.
Love seeing you, and I'm looking forward to the show. I hope you're having a good week. Anything exciting to report?
Oh, no. Well, I guess up north here in Wisconsin, we have been experiencing weather in the mid 50s in February. Unheard of.
We had that. That's what we've been having here in Florida. How's that overnight? It's been really cold. However, I have a feeling it's not going to last up there. Are people walking around with shorts? Guaranteed, right?
Listen, we're in Walmart wearing shorts when it's 30 below. So
yeah,
that's a given. We have perennials that pop up for spring, the crocuses.
Right.
Well, on the news, they're all popping up. They're popping up. And I'm telling you, we're going to get buried in snow come March. It's coming.
Oh, yeah. Because usually March, when I grew up in Montreal, to me, March was like the teaser month. You thought you were home, and then you got absolutely slammed with a snowstorm in March, like you're shoveling over your head, right? So that's the same thing in Wisconsin. Yeah, heavy snow.
Heavy shiat.
Heavy shiat. Well, you know what? You got to be hardy to live up there, and I admit I'm just not hardy.
I love the Four Seasons, and we love coming down to Florida.
You mean the hotel? Me too.
Yeah, right. That's a good hotel as well. But welcome, everybody. We are so glad you are here, and we're going to get right down to the show. Today's topic is piles of information. Richard, do you have piles of information?
Yeah, there's piles of information. I was doing a seminar for a group, and one of the sections was called "Getting Organized for the Process." And excuse me, there are piles. There is piles of information, and if you don't manage it well, it'll get out of control in no time at all. And so today we'll talk about how people can manage this in a good way to keep it to keep it under control. Because if not, it gets out of control. One of the things that I was thinking about is maybe from your standpoint, like the lending piece, when buyers have a particular business of interest, and I know you get this from business brokers as well, but a buyer finds a business of particular interest, from this time that they start looking at financing until they close an SBA deal, there's tons of paper. I was in a deal. I walked in. It was the SBA attorney was there a number of years ago, and I looked onto the table, and it was like 18 inches high of paper, right, that they were signing. And I said to them, like, they didn't enjoy this. They didn't appreciate it. I thought it was funny, but I said to them, the country has run for over 200 years magnificently on the Constitution, which is like 2 pages long. I said, How is it that this loan for this shitty little business has 18 inches of paper? But that's just the reality of it. So what does a buyer bring you as far as the paperwork, if you will, at the beginning, very early on, that they need to get things going with you?
And that's a brilliant question, my friend. And I would like to answer it twofold. A buyer, when they come to me, there will be the physical items that they need to bring for me to take a look at. But let's talk about piles of information that may be in the closet. Okay?
Right.
You know what I'm talking about, Richard? Piles of information.
Piles. Yeah.
I need to know the piles of information that are in the closet, otherwise known as skeletons in the closet. I'm not the underwriter. I'm not the seller. I am the consultant that needs to know what are these skeletons in the closet, if they're there, and if they're going to be there. And no holds barred back, man, because that underwriter is going to find those skeletons. So I want to just clear the air for our listeners out there. If you are a searcher, if you are a business buyer, I need to know all the piles of information that you have hidden in the closet. And I'll tell you if we can get around it, or if it's old enough, or if there is a process to clean it up before we present a package to a bank underwriter. So let's just start there. No skeletons in the closet. Would you agree on the seller side too, Richard?
Oh, 100%. And the one point that you made, which is critically important, is you got to bring those skeletons to the forefront, because the reality is they're going to be uncovered. Like, there's, without question, bet on it. It's just a matter of when. And so if you get too far into the process and some of these skeletons or issues start to surface, whether from the seller or whether they be from the buyer, it's the quickest way to lose all credibility with the other side, derail a deal. And as it relates to the lender side, if there's just, bring them up you bring them up early and find out about them early, because you may as well know early whether or not this is even financeable. And so, thinking that you're going to get away with something, whether you're a seller, a buyer, or not disclosing something, is complete insanity. This happens more from a seller standpoint who may not disclose something. So it's really incumbent upon the buyer to really dig and, get some of these issues out and make sure that they know what they're dealing with. Because chances are, you could typically deal with most scenarios. It's only the scenario that if you don't know what you're dealing with, right? That becomes impossible to deal with. But, and that lends itself for other stage of the process when hopefully we can help people get a little organized with some of the paperwork involved throughout the process.
Yeah. Sage. I love the ads there. And I'm thinking about business brokers as well, because there are probably a few listeners out there that are business brokers. And as a lender, one of the challenges that I always faced with many business brokers, not all, is as soon as I start to sniff something in what is presented to me, which we'll get into that, I have questions, but they don't have the answers. And sometimes the answers need to be proof. And it might just be it's a skeleton in the closet. What is your take on what business brokers should do? Should they be knowing this out of the gates before it's listed? Because it seems like to me, there's a lot of listings out there that have piles of skeletons, piles of information in the closet that aren't even discovered yet or proven how to put closure on it.
I'm going to answer this like one of my kids always answers. Yes, but, right? So it's yes, right? Yeah, but. So they should know it. But the reality is they don't. There's a combination of a couple things. Number one, the seller doesn't always provide them with the information. And then you have some brokers don't dig for the information. So between the two of them, you have scenarios where it falls short. So from a broker standpoint, if they don't, I fundamentally believe, I know in my engagements, I want to know that business next to the seller. I want to know it better than anybody else on the planet. But it doesn't always happen that way. And so, but it's incumbent upon the business broker to make sure that they dig in with the seller to make sure they get the answers and the information, because you want to move the financing piece along as fast as possible, because it does take an awful long lot of time, and SBA loans take time to get them underwritten, reviewed, approved. There's paperwork and documentation seems to be right up to the final bell. But if the broker doesn't have that information readily available, it doesn't really matter whether they should or they shouldn't. They have to get it. They have to get it expeditiously.
Yep. Boom. And for all the business buyers or business sellers out there, or those that are thinking of preparing to sell, tracking all of the skeletons or documents that you need, track it and then provide it and talk about it with your business brokers. So in all fairness, we're not here to bash the business brokers, because there are a lot of sellers, soon to be sellers, that don't want to share that information. Right.
Yeah. Or they don't understand why it has to be shared. And so explaining it to them, business brokers want to get deals done, and sometimes they have hard ass sellers and they don't want to disclose certain information. But they need to understand, they're sellers, and I'm sure they convey it to them. And sometimes they have to just be more forceful and say, look, you're not getting the money unless we provide the information. So they have to really put their, put the screws to them to let them know the information has to be provided. If not, you're not going to the next step. If there's a cog in the wheel, the deal's not moving. And really conveying it to them, and as often as a seller, as a broker may not have the information just from for whatever reason, there's an equal amount of time that sellers haven't provided. So they really have to push for it, and that also lends itself on the buy side, where buyers are going to get inundated with information from the get-go. You guys mentioning, I had this seminar that I was running on behalf of someone out of town a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about this getting organized piece. And buyers need to really, I find most buyers are terribly organized, or they think that this is something they're just going to log on their phones or what have you. And there's so much paperwork. And this is besides just the financing part. I mean, there's so much paperwork. There's, business listings, there's NDAs, there's the financials that come, there's other information about the business. Then you start doing investigation related to the competition, the employees, the industry, etc. And you start gathering all this information and paperwork and piles of information. So if you don't keep it under control quickly, it gets out of hand fast. And, we'll talk about that in a second. And then you have the whole other piece where when there's an LOI in place and you start to formalize due diligence, there's a whole other series of documentation that need to be kept under control. And it's very easy to lose control. And once you do that, it's just hard to keep the deal together, So buyers really need to do, and I've gone through this a bunch of times and talk about it extensively. So we should jump into that as far as how they keep themselves organized, because the piles of information don't stop.
It doesn't. And thankfully today, Richard, we are living in a world of more electronic tools online, instead of the old days where we had to email everything and the email server couldn't handle the boatloads of information.
Right.
So there are even SBA lenders out there today that have certain programs that are platforms that make it easy for the underwriters, the closing team, the processors, everybody on the bank side can see when the seller side uploads information into this platform, and the buyer side. So it's all in one portal.
Right.
Not all banks have access to some of these platforms, but there are plenty out there that are starting to step up their game. It's more secure and it's more organized versus emailing everything, which is
no doubt.
headache.
Yeah. I mean, even the smallest deals now typically have a data room, and you're able to upload the information, give people access to certain parts of it. But, oftentimes before they even get to that point, the buyers have a ton of information. They start out looking at businesses, and they may look at 25 or 50 businesses and have the business listing from the broker or from BizBuySell or businessesforsale.com, one of the online databases of businesses for sale, and some down. I like to deal in paper because I make my notes on it, but I'm a little old. I'm an old fart. So, I like to print out the information, write my notes, but there has to be a way to scan and keep it on the wraps, because you want to be able to look for it after. Then you get an NDA, and then you get the initial financials, and then you get another set of financials, and then you get here's a report. Oh, here's a copy of of a report they did for a certain client, or here's this and here's that, and all this information. You start building this portfolio on a particular business, and you've got a ton of information, and then you're looking at 5 different companies. So that's multiplied by 5. And it's not just a matter of just saving it to saving it as an email, because you don't even have the data room at this point, but you have to figure out a way. And one thing that I've told buyers is, as soon as you find a business that's of interest to you, once you go past the first step, meaning your first step is you sending in an inquiry, you might get back an NDA and you might get the business listing. If you look at that and there's of interest to you, and you're going to go to the next step, maybe a conversation with a seller, or there may be some additional documentation, you immediately have to set up a folder, whether it be a paper folder or a digital folder, and name it that business. Okay. And drop everything in there. Now, if the conversation abruptly ends for whatever reason, that's okay. That's fine. If your conversation continues, you may have to get a little more granular in that folder. Well, you ultimately will have to get more granular of naming the files, but you've got to keep folders on every business. Oftentimes you're going to look at that as a reference to another. But if you just keep dropping them into a folder of, in your Outlook called, businesses, I mean, you're never going to be able to find shit. It's going to be like all over the place, right? It's all over the place all the time. And
kind of like finding our backstage link for this show today. Where's our link?
You and I both, right? Like it's like you think it's the first time we did it. Okay. And like I send, and I live for SIA. Okay. And I said, they're like, where's the fucking link? Excuse me. I was like, I can't find this link. All of a sudden sorry. We're, like, right? It's like, yes. So that's us. And we allegedly know what we're
That's right.
doing.
So organization is number one. And I like where you went with the data room, where if you're a buyer, and I share data rooms with my buyers, ShareFile,
Right.
Dropbox, there's all of them. But I love your idea of creating a folder for each business that you're searching. And even if it's a business that in the moment we gathered as much as we could, and for whatever reason, maybe there's another offer on it and it's on hold, let it sit, because I have seen deals where buyers revisited and all of a
Yep.
sudden went back to that business.
Went back to that business,
Mhm.
absolutely. Or you find a business, similar industry, and you use that as a point of reference to look at it. And by the way, I know Sia's sitting in the background, the brains of the operation. I was thinking, I have a slide that I used at this recent seminar that lists all the folders that a buyer needs to set up related to a business, and that they're looking at. And if anybody wants to email me at richardparker.com through the contact page, I'm happy to share that actual slide with people, or send them a copy of the PDF, because for business buyers, they'll find it very helpful, because you want to keep yourself organized, because if not, it gets out of control in a hurry. And people can also set up their own data room, like you use a platform like Box or something,
Yeah.
and that's a very good way to do it. The underlying theme here is you've got to get organized, because there's a ton of paper, there's a ton of information. And also, for example, I've seen buyers sign 2 NDAs for the same business with 2 different brokers.
Mhm.
And they said, oh, it sounds familiar. So when you're signing NDAs for businesses at the beginning, at least have a folder that's called NDAs, and put all your signed NDAs in there. And then if something sounds familiar, well, if you have to go find it, or if there's something comes up, you need to question it, your NDAs are all in the same place. Subsequent to that, when you follow up with a particular business, then that business gets a folder, and you can have a bunch of subfolders related to financials and competition and resources and employees and assets and whatever the case may be. But get yourself set up. Don't because if not, you'll be drowning in paper. You're laughing, because it's true. It's out of control fast.
That's right. And back to the buyer side, I believe searchers, because they all start out as searchers, and business brokers are inundated with searcher calls on the daily. When
You mean
really,
searchers, the fancy name for buyers, right?
correct.
Because they're calling themselves searchers now. We'll
I
call
think
them by.
it seems to be searchers, and I think searchers is fair in the beginning, and then eventually they become the business buyer. Searchers can be a pain in the ass for business brokers, because they're not prepared and they're not fully vetted. They're not ready. They're
That's my
just,
world. I
yeah,
live with that. Yeah,
yeah.
of course. And and very often they think they're ready, or they think they know what they're doing. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But yes, they're not prepared. They are not
So
prepared across the board.
I want to reel that back in and tell the searchers, slow down, slow down. I know it's exciting, kind of like first time home buying. You want to go look at all the homes that you think you might want to buy and move into on a Sunday open house. I'm going to tell you right now, probably more than half the homes that you're walking into without any kind of pre-qualification letter, knowing what the heck you qualify for to buy a house, you're in the wrong open house. I'm
You're in the
telling you
wrong
right
open house.
now.
You're in the wrong.
Yes.
And it's worse with a business, because, even if you're in the wrong open house, even if you manage to buy that home, for example, and you're not thrilled with it, well, you're going to be able to sell it. Buy the wrong business, and it's going out of business. So, just, yeah. So you're right. Slow down, get smart, get educated, and attack this process in a good, meaningful way. And then the output at the end is going to be positive.
That's right. And what I do, because I'm organized, you've seen my emails. I try to be very, very specific with what I have to
Oh, no
say.
kidding. You're talking to me like we just met. Yes.
Yeah. Well, there's a
Yes, it's
method to
great.
this madness, because yes, I want to talk to searchers, business buyers. I want to understand more about their goals, what they qualify for. And then there's going to be the piles of information that I need to collect to see if they're qualified. A lot of what I speak, I also follow up in writing in email. Why? As point of reference, not just for me, because I can't remember everybody's backstory about their skeletons in the closet or their goals or what they want to do. I need a trail, and I'm teaching you, the business buyer, what needs to be done at certain stages and the why behind it. So I'll tell you verbally, but I'm going to follow it up with an email and a list and a checklist to help keep you organized, along with that Dropbox link to pop everything in there. So method to the madness is listen to your advisors, whether it's Richard, whether it's Deb, whether it's the business broker, the CPA, the attorney. We all listen well. Where we lack is taking action.
Yeah. And one of the things, when you mentioned there's a lot of stakeholders in this. So you may have someone like yourself, you may have someone like myself, or you might have a broker, you might have an accountant. Well, you'll have an accountant, you'll have an attorney, and who knows what else, financial planner, whatever the case may be. When you start getting and you have an offer in place, and then you have to start doing formalized due diligence, all these stakeholders have tasks, including yourself as the buyer. The buyer has a list of things that they have to do is longer than everybody else's combined. And so one of the things that I tell people to, regardless of the format that you do it, whether it could be in a data room, whether you use your phone, whether you use your PC, or whether you do it, in a Word document, you've got to create a master to-do list after you have an LOI or a purchase order into place that lists out everything that has to be done related to due diligence and who has to do it. And as importantly, when it has to be done by, because I've seen cases where buyers have gone past the end of their due diligence and then try to back out of a deal.
Mm.
And they said, oh shit, I didn't realize my due diligence period expired 2 days ago.
Mhm.
Tough, too late at that point, unless you have, you may have a relationship with a seller and they say, okay, we're good to go. But you need to put together a master to-do list, and you put Deb and Richard and Mr. CPA and Mrs. Attorney and Mr. Accountant, or whatever the case may be, everything that has to be done. And the other thing is, during this process of buying a business, looking at a business, investigating a business, talking to the seller, there's a billion things that you're going to be thinking of that are running through your mind of things that you have to do. Always keep a notepad with you, whether, again, be digital or in your car or what have you, and write it down immediately, because you're going to forget it. And you don't want to forget something, because if you forget something important, it could come back to bite you in the ass. And so you have to think about this. This is a project. It's project management. So finding a way to keep everything together in a good, organized way, and keeping everybody else organized.
Yeah.
Because you're the buyer, you're the chief here.
That's right. And for those items that you said would bite you in the dupa again.
I forgot. Yeah. In the dupa. Yeah.
In the dupa. I
dupa.
know what some of those items are as the business buyer from the get-go. And I will stay on your dupa as the business buyer to make sure you are following through with the action needed to not delay your loan closing. Now, if you decide to just listen and not take action, that's on you. And
That's
guess
on
what?
you. Yeah.
Guess what? I told you verbally. And as I said earlier, Richard, I put it in writing, in email. So I have the chain of telling you what to do in an email format, because we forget. I need to hear things sometimes 2-3 times before
Like
I
my
get
kids.
it. Yeah, we're all human. And there's a lot of movement in these transactions.
A lot of movement.
We haven't even gotten to the point when the loan is approved and there's a commitment letter, and then there's the conditions that have to be met before closing. That's another piles of information. That might be another show.
Yeah, there's piles of information. One of the key things here is understand if you're a business buyer, and it happens on the seller side as well. But you may have all these stakeholders or people that are going to help you. And Deb is, she runs things like a Rolex watch, and that's wonderful. But this is the buyer's responsibility. It's not the lender's responsibility. It's not the broker's responsibility. It's not the accountant's responsibility. It's not the attorney's responsibility. It's the buyer's responsibility. And yes, you bring all these people onto your team to help you along the way, but it's incumbent upon you, the buyer, to make sure that everybody is organized. Because you know why? You may be dealing with someone like you, Deb, who's very organized, and then you'll deal with an attorney who can't find their pencil. I mean, you walk into most attorneys' offices, and certainly accountants, right? At certain times of year, you got piles. You think they're in the paper manufacturing business. They got shit everywhere. And so very often they're not organized. So you can't rely on them. It's the buyer. This is incumbent on the buyer.
This is so good, Richard. You are so spot on. Not all attorneys, but I have seen some that screwed up the process toward the tail end, trying to move the file to a closing because they're lost in their own information.
Yeah, of course.
You're right. Drive your bus.
That's
You're
it.
the buyer.
You're the buyer. You've got to keep everything under control. And if if you rely on other people, which you have to, you've got to make sure everybody is pulling in the same direction. And if the accountant has to get a certain, information to you by a certain period of time, well, it's not a case of just saying, hey, Bob, I need this by next Thursday. And then expect it to happen that they automatically sent this to the other party. Then you got to make sure on Wednesday you call them and say, hey, this is due tomorrow. Are we good? And if it's not, because if not, you're going to miss deadlines and you're going to have a problem because you're going to miss deadlines that are going to train wreck your deal.
And you're the one paying for the services that are supporting you. So speak up.
Speak up. Speak up, baby.
Hey, listen, I think it's time for questions.
We got a bunch of them. So
yeah. I'll let you read this first one here, and let's Patrick.
Last property I purchased, I walked into a lawyer's office, I had to find him in a mountain of paper. Yeah, 100%. James is always, let's see, going down here. I saw a question earlier. Sorry to be looking off to the side. I'm not checking emails.
Well, Sia has one up here right on the main slide here. How will AI help business buyers get through these processes faster?
Well, we're seeing some of it. First of all, we're talking about artificial intelligence, and we just had this conversation recently, and I said, sadly, most of the people that I deal with have artificial intelligence, but I know one area that seems to be, to me, is really, really exciting and I had dinner with this law firm down in Miami, and the two principals, and they're really integrating AI and taking documentation that in a typical M&A transaction used to be a $25,000 cost to a buyer. They do larger deals, but not monsters, but larger than typically Main Street USA deals. And the documentation assembly that used to cost about $25,000 from the various documents, assets purchase and sale agreement, the UCC filing, all these various documents, they've now reduced that to a $500 cost as a result of AI, because AI isn't that unbelievable? And the nice thing about it, they're actually passing the savings on to their clients. That's what's even nicer.
There we go.
So in AI, certain things that are rote, that are template, certain agreements. Now, you never want to have AI writing your agreement because every deal is different and there's different contingencies, but certain processes or documentation will definitely benefit from AI. I think AI may also potentially be able to scour the internet in an effective way to produce some targeted acquisitions. It's being done already in some way. I don't think it's being done that great from what I've seen. And I've spoken to probably a dozen lead generation companies that are using a version of AI to generate deal flow. It's okay. It's not great, but it'll keep getting better. So I think that is going to be really, really, really helpful. But it's going to take some time.
I agree. It's going to take time because AI is still humans putting in the information, and humans are not necessarily always accurate. I have seen AI spit out some feedback in regards to SBA SOP that was not accurate or too old, or the policy had changed. As they always say, AI is a tool. You just can't count on it 100%. For if it gives you a checklist, it might be close, but there might be some things off. But boy, if you're asking AI for answers to legal questions in regards to your transaction, I would tell you no.
Right? Because right now AI is not the believable party. Right. It's an aggregation of information that's out there, to the best of my understanding how this works. And so, there's a lot of horrific information out there, misleading or inaccurate or incomplete information. So I think AI will play a role, but until it's able to discern, who is the believable party as far as the origins of the information that they're assembling, it's there's going to be a lot left to be desired.
Where I do see AI speeding up the process, Richard, for business buyers, we're not there yet, or maybe it's in practice. Spreading deals, you can enter all the business tax returns, and it will. I haven't done that yet, but I hear it will spread the deals, and underwriters may have an easier job getting the underwriting done faster because of AI, but we still need a second set of a credit manager, a supervisor eyes, underwriter eyes, double checking AI, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We have a question from, is it Chasen?
Yeah,
Jason
probably
Ford?
Jason.
Jason Foreign. He said, "Is there a research tool that you two suggest for finding businesses?" It's a great question because part of it we just talked about related to AI. There are some lead generation tools as far as finding businesses concerned. Typically, the programs are pretty expensive at this point, and they're done for more institutional buyers like private equity firms, family offices, etc. However, there's, as far as the search is concerned, what you ultimately want to get to is start off at the beginning using some of the databases of businesses for sale because you could weed out ones that are don't make sense for you, types of businesses, and then still the best tool of finding businesses is really these direct searches
Mhm.
for businesses, but you've got to look at this as a funnel because at the beginning you can't if you can't be interested in 20 types of businesses. When I say 20 types, commercial landscaping, business services, durable medical equipment, have this laundry list of potential business types that you'd be interested in, then try to send a direct solicitation because your list will be 1 million companies. And so you want to be able to whittle it down. By and large, the business for sale websites are used at the initial stage. It's a good laboratory to whittle out and figure out what type of business is right for you. But there's nothing, Jason, that's really sophisticated yet. That's getting the job done. What's getting the job done is good old fashioned roll up your sleeves, network like an animal, get the
Yeah.
word out to everybody at every opportunity and every situation to tell them that you're looking for a business because it does. That's the that's the blue collar, pack your lunch pail
Yeah.
part of the process.
I like to think the old fashioned way, like you said, networking, especially with LinkedIn. We have business advisors that are working with small businesses to help them be more profitable, more efficient. They have an idea in their head who is thinking short term, long term wise when they might want to exit. It
Right.
doesn't hurt to network with those folks. Not that you need to know names of who, what, when, or where, but as long as you have an idea that you can give to them that I'm looking for this kind of business, they'll add you to their portfolio or their CRM to contact if they know one of their clients is looking to sell privately and not be public on the markets.
Oh, absolutely. Unless you're in a confidentiality situation where you have a job and for some reason you're worried that word gets out or what have you. I get that. Outside of that, if that's not an impediment to your search, the goal is, which said earlier, you've got to tell everybody and you've got to network with everybody.
Mhm.
All of these venues, whether they be networking groups, whether it be online businesses for sale, business brokers, lawyers, accountants, chambers of commerce, businesses that you frequent on a regular basis, people that you meet in the street. You got to tell everybody because you never know when the lead is coming from. If we
Yeah.
don't have enough time in the show to talk about some of the crazy ways that I've come across businesses that I ended up acquiring. And it's just, you got to tell everybody. It's like walk around with a sandwich board.
I'd love to see that on you one day.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. I can have it ready for next week.
Oh, yeah, please.
No
We would love
problem.
to see that.
Sia mentioned something about question number 3.
Here we go. Jordan James Rogers here. Let's see. What do we have a question up here? Thank you for these great questions to our loyal listeners. Are we seeing AI help searchers to analyze financial statements and provide feedback? I don't, I hear AI can spread financials. I haven't practiced it yet myself because I tend to trust my own spreading versus AI at this point, just because AI is not perfect yet. I've noticed that. I'll use it as a tool if I'm trying to search for something specific to the industry, but to actually analyze financial statements, I don't think we're ready yet, Richard, with that. Do you?
Here's my take on it. I'm all for technology. I'm all
Mhm.
for advancement and I'm all for improving the way we do things. These type of scenarios is you've got to learn this yourself. You've got to be able to look at a spreadsheet
Yeah.
from a business and be able to put 2-3 periods together and look at them on a spreadsheet and have the acumen to be able to extract or identify what are the problems or what needs to be questioned further.
Mhm.
AI, yeah, but if it exists, great. I don't know that I would ever want to get away from the way I look at a business to
Mhm.
scrub a financial statement myself. Okay.
Yeah,
Because you know what? One thing's for sure. I trust me when
I
it
like
relates.
that.
Now, I'm not the,
Mhm.
but I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I've been doing this long enough. So I trust me to be able to look at that and look for problems. Would I bring in something like AI as an additional tool to augment what I do? Of course. The same
Yeah.
way you'd bring in an accountant to augment what you do, to look at the financial statements afterwards. But you need to have an understanding of a financial statement to look at it
Mhm.
yourself when you get a business, to make that comparison. Okay. And so, I think Patrick mentioned here that they're good for finding inconsistencies,
Mhm.
but yes, what's the reasoning behind the inconsistency? For example, you look at a spreadsheet and marketing costs have either gone up or down, and there's an inconsistency on that line. Well, if you can see, you can see the right on the spreadsheet that it was 200,000 one year, 150 the next year, 175. What is the reasoning for that? Is it,
Mhm.
and the only person that can answer that is you and the seller. And so it may be able to spot and say, marketing is down 3.2%. Marketing spend is down 3.2% this year over last. Well, I don't need AI to tell me that. I understand it. It points it out. But the
Mhm.
more important thing as a buyer is you want to understand why. And
Yeah,
AI is not answering why
there
because
you
it's
go.
particular to that business.
That's right. And for the business buyers out there, I will show you how to do the spreads. I have a template where I put the financials in and I kind of walk through it. Some of you know how to do it already. Some of you don't yet. That's okay. I didn't know how to do it years ago. And like you said, I'm still learning. There's still things that I'm learning. That's why show and tell, like
Yeah.
like we did in the kindergarten days, right?
Yep.
Show
Absolutely.
and tell.
Show
And
and tell.
that's
Absolutely.
that's my job. And sometimes we have to show and tell the business broker or show and tell the seller, like, hey, did you see this? And that's okay. I'm not trying to challenge them. There might be an ad back that I think should be added back that maybe they missed.
Yeah, it's okay to challenge them. It's nothing wrong with challenging them, right? Absolutely, absolutely.
There you
It's
go.
nice to be good and respectful, but let's be honest here. I mean, there's nothing wrong with challenging them, either side of the equation, because if they miss something, they want to add it back. It helps the financials. And if something's in there that shouldn't be in there, they need to understand why, because it's going to be, a potential detriment to getting the amount of money that they anticipated getting. So challenging is good.
It is good. And Lord have mercy, they challenge me all the time. So I guess I should challenge more often, right, Richard?
Challenge more often,
Darn
absolutely.
right.
Well, I
Darn
think
right.
we're at our wrap up time, according to Sia.
Okay, well, listen, you have your special report up here. It's good timing. So maybe share with our loyal listeners what that's all about.
So this is a report that I wrote and there's modifications related to the financing part of the deal that Deb has been a great contributor to the information. Well, it's 10 things the sellers won't tell you. And I urge anybody who's thinking about buying a business to go through this report, because it's going to point out things that specifically a seller is not going to necessarily be upfront about. And that could be related to terms, to pricing, to customer issues, to employee issues, to competitive issues, and
Mhm.
things that they are not required to disclose because they're not necessarily material. And if you don't look for them, you're not going to find them. And so
Mhm.
these are things that they're common to the equation. It's a great, I think it's about 40-page report. It's going to be it's really, really helpful. It's a lot of great information in there. And so I strongly suggest anyone who's thinking about acquiring a business, just download the report, and it's a really good read, really helpful. If
Awesome.
I do say so myself.
Yes, it is. And in closing, I would like to thank our show sponsor and producer, Brilliant Beam Media, Sia and team. They are the behind the scenes producer of our Business Buying Banter show. And if you go to Richard's profile on LinkedIn or mine, or follow our YouTube channel, Business Buying Banter, you will see several shorts, clips of all of our previous shows, and some of them are quite funny. I enjoy laughing at them myself. And the production behind those clips would be Brilliant Beam Media. So thank you for all you do to raise our game in this technology industry. Richard and I are better at helping people buy and sell businesses than we are at creating video clips.
Oh yeah, if you rely on me for that, you're in deep shit. I mean, yeah,
We
I'm not the
couldn't
guy.
even find the link for today,
Yeah,
folks. So
we couldn't even find the link. So right. I mean, I have enough challenge in the morning getting my emails. So yes, Sia's like She, what do you say? She's the bomb. She's the best. She's
Yes, she
absolutely
is.
fantastic.
She is.
Thank you, Sia.
So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, we want to tell you all to have a great day. Consider entrepreneurship through acquisition. Skip the startup, baby. Buy something that's working, right?
Amen to that. Skip the
Yeah.
startup. I like
Skip
it.
the startup.
It's a
And
good
we
bumper
will be
sticker.
here. Yep, we will be here same time, same channel next week, Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern. Any closing thoughts for you, Richard?
Hopefully people understand the amount of documentation involved. So get themselves really, really organized. I'll repeat that if someone wants to get that list of the initial files to be created, send through an email. Happy to provide that. And as usual, Deb, you're a wealth of information. I hope the listeners found helpful information. I know I always gain a ton of it from you when we spend this time together. Can't wait till next week. I'm sure I'll speak to you about 100 times in between now and then, and
Ditto.
looking forward to it. So
Yes, ditto.
have a terrific rest of your afternoon, everybody.
Out of here.